I never expected to see Riley again, especially not like this. There I was, standing in the bustling Tampa Convention Center, surrounded by the sweet aroma of sugar and butter, my hands trembling as I arranged my lavender macarons on a pristine white plate. The annual Sweet Tampa baking competition was in full swing, and I, Quinn Thompson, tattoo artist extraordinaire, had somehow convinced myself to enter. As I glanced up from my display, my heart nearly stopped. There she was, Riley Gonzalez, my college sweetheart, looking even more radiant than she did 25 years ago. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and those piercing blue eyes were focused intently on a contestant's creation. She was a judge. Of course she was. Riley had always been the one with the real culinary talent. I watched, transfixed, as she moved from table to table, her elegant fingers breaking off pieces of pastry, her lips pursing in concentration as she savored each bite. It was like watching a dance I'd long forgotten the steps to, but my body still hummed with the rhythm. Then suddenly she was in front of me. Those blue eyes widened in recognition, and I felt my cheeks flush. "Quinn?" she asked, her voice a mix of surprise and something else I couldn't quite place. "Quinn Thompson, is that really you?" I managed a smile, hoping the tremor in my voice wasn't too obvious. "Hey Riley, long time no see, huh?" She laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Only about 2.5 decades. What in the world are you doing here? Last I heard, you were making your mark in the tattoo world, not the pastry one." I shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "Diversifying my portfolio, you know how it is." I gestured to my plate of macarons. "Care to try one? For old time's sake?" Riley's eyebrow arched, a playful smirk tugging at her lips. "Well, I am a judge. It would be remiss of me not to sample every entry." She plucked a macaron from the plate, her fingers brushing against mine for just a moment. The contact was electric, sending a jolt through my system that I hadn't felt in years. As she bit into the delicate cookie, her eyes closed, and a small moan of appreciation escaped her lips. My breath caught in my throat. When she opened her eyes again, they were shining with something I couldn't quite name. "Lavender," she said softly. "You remembered?" I nodded, memories flooding back of lazy Sunday mornings in our college apartment, the scent of lavender hanging in the air as Riley experimented with new recipes. How could I forget? We stood there for a moment, the bustle of the competition fading away around us. Then, clearing her throat, Riley asked, "So, are you still in Tampa? Married? Kids?" I chuckled, holding up my bare left hand. "Tampa, yes. Married, not anymore. You?" She mirrored my gesture, wiggling her own ring-free fingers. "Same story. Turns out the corporate world and marriage don't always mix well." "Corporate world?" I couldn't hide my surprise. "What happened to opening your own bakery?" Riley's smile turned a bit wistful. "Life, I guess. But hey, being an executive has its perks, though sometimes I miss the simple pleasure of creating something with my own hands." Her gaze flicked to my arms, covered in intricate tattoos. "Unlike you, it seems. You've certainly embraced your artistic side." I felt a rush of pride, coupled with a sudden, intense desire to show her every inch of my inked skin. "Well, if you ever want to add some artwork to your canvas, you know where to find me." The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted them. It was too forward, too presumptuous. But to my surprise, Riley's eyes lit up. "You know what? I just might take you up on that offer, Quinn Thompson." As she moved on to the next table, I couldn't help but watch her go, my heart racing with possibilities I hadn't considered in years. Little did I know, this chance encounter was about to turn my carefully inked life completely upside down. I was in the middle of sketching a intricate mandala design when the bell above my studio door chimed. Looking up, I nearly dropped my pencil. There, standing in the entrance of Inked Dreams, was Riley Gonzalez. She looked different from the competition, more relaxed, her blonde hair falling in loose waves around her shoulders. But those blue eyes were just as striking, scanning the walls adorned with my artwork before landing on me. "Hey there, stranger," she said, a hint of nervousness in her voice. "I hope you weren't kidding about that offer." I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Riley, hi. No, definitely not kidding. What brings you to my humble abode?" She took a deep breath. "Well, Quinn, I've decided it's time for my first tattoo." I couldn't help but grin. Really? Little Miss Play It Safe is ready to get inked? Riley rolled her eyes, but there was a playful spark there. Hey, I'll have you know I've become quite the risk-taker in my old age. Old age? I scoffed, gesturing for her to take a seat. Please, you look exactly the same as you did in college. A faint blush colored her cheeks. Flatterer. But seriously, I've been thinking about this for a while, turning 50 next month. It feels like the right time to do something a little crazy. As I sat across from her, our knees almost touching, I felt a familiar flutter in my stomach. Well, you've come to the right place for crazy. What did you have in mind? We spent the next hour discussing designs, placement, and meaning. Riley wanted something to represent new beginnings, a phoenix rising from the ashes. As we talked, the years melted away. It was like we were back in our dorm room, dreaming about the future. So, I said, sketching out a rough design, what made you decide to take the corporate route instead of opening that bakery? Riley sighed, her fingers tracing the outline of the phoenix on the paper. Life, I guess. Got married right out of college, had a kid, needed stability. The corporate ladder seemed like the safest bet. I nodded, understanding all too well how life could derail our best-laid plans. And now? Now? She laughed softly. Now I'm divorced, my daughter's in college, and I'm wondering if I made the right choices. Our eyes met, and for a moment I saw a glimpse of the girl I'd fallen for all those years ago. It's never too late to change course, you know. Maybe you're right, she mused. Speaking of change, guess what? I'm starting a new job next week. Oh yeah? Where at? Suncoast Media. They're branching out into digital marketing, and they needed someone with my experience. I froze, my pencil hovering above the paper. Suncoast Media? In the Bayshore Tower? Riley nodded, looking puzzled. Yeah, why? I couldn't help but laugh. Well, looks like we're going to be neighbors. My studio's moving into the ground floor next month. Her eyes widened in surprise, then crinkled with laughter. You're kidding! Talk about a small world. As our laughter subsided, a comfortable silence fell between us. I found myself studying her face, noticing the fine lines around her eyes that weren't there before, the confident set of her jaw. She was different, yes, but in all the best ways. So, I said, clearing my throat, when do you want to do this? Riley bit her lip, considering. How about next Friday? I can come by after work, christen my new job with some fresh ink. I nodded, trying to ignore the thrill that ran through me at the thought of seeing her again so soon. Friday it is. Just remember, no backing out. I don't want to have to track you down in that big fancy office. She stood up, gathering her purse. Don't worry, Quinn. I'm not the same girl who chickened out of skydiving on spring break. I'm all in. As she reached the door, she paused, turning back to me with a soft smile. It's really good to see you again, Quinn. I'm glad I worked up the courage to come in. Me too, Riley, I replied, meaning it more than I cared to admit. Me too. After she left, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phoenix design. It felt like the universe was playing some cosmic joke, bringing Riley back into my life just as I was trying to start a new chapter. But as I refined the sketch, adding delicate shading to the rising flames, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement. Whatever was coming, it felt like the beginning of something unexpected, maybe even a little dangerous. But as I looked at my own tattoos, each one a reminder of a life fully lived, I knew I was ready for whatever this new adventure might bring. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of packing boxes and coordinating movers. Before I knew it, Inked Dreams was officially open for business in the ground floor of Bayshore Tower. The sleek, modern lobby was a far cry from my old hole-in-the-wall studio, but I had to admit, the change felt good. I was in the middle of arranging my inks when a familiar voice called out, Well, look who's moving up in the world. I turned to see Riley leaning against the doorframe, a teasing smile on her face. She looked different in her corporate attire. A crisp white blouse and tailored slacks that hugged her curves in all the right places. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. Just trying to keep up with the big shots like you, I quipped. How's the new job treating you? She sauntered in, running her fingers along the edge of my workstation. It's interesting. Lots of meetings, lots of buzzwords. Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking a different language. I chuckled, remembering how she used to get flustered in our college public speaking class. I'm sure you're knocking him dead up there. Riley's smile faltered a bit. I hope so. There's been some talk of restructuring mergers. You know how it is in the corporate world, always changing. I nodded, even though I had no idea. My world was ink and skin, a far cry from boardrooms and bottom lines. Well, hey, if it all goes south, you can always come work for me. I could use someone to handle the books. She laughed, the sound echoing through the empty studio. Oh yeah, and what would my title be? Chief Financial Officer of Tattoos? Has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Our eyes met, and for a moment, I felt that old spark flicker between us, but before I could say anything else, Riley's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, sighing. Duty calls, but I'm still on for Friday, right? I nodded, trying to ignore the way my heart skipped at the thought. Absolutely. 7 o'clock, don't be late. As she walked out, I couldn't help but watch her go, wondering what exactly I was getting myself into. Friday night rolled around, and I found myself more nervous than I'd been in years. I'd tattooed countless people, but somehow the thought of Riley in my chair made my palms sweat. She arrived right on time, looking a little frazzled. Sorry, she said, running a hand through her hair. Meeting ran late. Some big announcement coming next week. Everyone's on edge. I gestured to the chair. Well, lucky for you, I've got just the thing to take your mind off work. As I prepped the area on her shoulder blade, I could feel the tension radiating from her. You okay? I asked softly. We don't have to do this if you're not ready. Riley took a deep breath. No, I want to. It's been a day, you know? I nodded, understanding all too well. Want to talk about it? And so, as I began to work, Riley started to talk. She told me about the pressure at work, the looming threat of layoffs, the constant feeling of having to prove herself in a world that often felt alien to her. Sometimes, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper, I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed my original plan. Opened that bakery, lived a simpler life. I paused, wiping away excess ink. It's not too late, you know. You're Riley Gonzalez. You can do anything you set your mind to. She turned her head, meeting my gaze. You always did believe in me, didn't you? The air between us suddenly felt charged. I could see the memories flickering in her eyes. Late nights studying, stolen kisses between classes, dreams whispered in the dark. Without thinking, I leaned in closer. I still do, I murmured. For a heartbeat, we stayed like that, suspended in the moment. Then, slowly, inevitably, our lips met. It was soft at first, tentative, but then Riley's hand came up to cup my cheek, and the kiss deepened. It was like coming home and embarking on a new adventure all at once. When we finally pulled apart, both of us were breathless. Wow, Riley said, a slow smile spreading across her face. That was... Yeah, I agreed, unable to stop grinning. It was... We finished the tattoo in comfortable silence, the air humming with unspoken possibilities. As Riley admired the finished product in the mirror, her phoenix rising proud and defiant, I knew that something had shifted between us. It's perfect, she said, her eyes meeting mine in the reflection. Thank you, Quinn. I squeezed her shoulder gently. Anytime. As she left that night, we made plans to grab coffee the following week, but fate, it seemed, had other ideas. Monday morning, I arrived at the studio to find the lobby of Bayshore Tower in chaos. Employees were huddled in groups, whispering furiously. I caught snippets of conversation, merger, downsizing, restructuring. My heart sank as I remembered Riley's words about the big announcement. I pulled out my phone to text her, but before I could, I spotted her across the lobby. Our eyes met, and I could see the storm of emotions on her face. Without a word, I nodded towards my studio. Riley hesitated for a moment, then made her way over, slipping inside just as a group of suit-clad executives exited the elevator. What's going on? I asked, as soon as the door closed behind her. Riley let out a shaky breath. It's happening. The merger, the layoffs, it's all happening. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. Are you? She shook her head. I don't know yet, but Quinn. Her blue eyes met mine, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. I think it's time for me to make a change. A real one this time. As I squeezed her hand, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. The phoenix on her shoulder seemed to shimmer in the morning light, a promise of rebirth and new beginnings. Little did we know, the storm that was about to hit would test us in ways we never imagined. The next few weeks were a blur of stolen moments and hushed conversations. Riley and I found ourselves gravitating towards each other, seeking comfort in the midst of the corporate chaos. Every lunch break, every quick coffee run became an opportunity to reconnect, to rediscover the easy rhythm we'd once shared. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was finishing up a consultation, the bell above my door chimed. I looked up to see a young woman with Riley's eyes and jawline standing in my studio, her gaze curious and slightly wary. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. She stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Brianna Riley's daughter, and you must be Quinn." I shook her hand, my mind racing. Riley had mentioned her daughter was visiting, but I hadn't expected her to show up here. "Nice to meet you, Brianna. Your mom's told me a lot about you." Brianna's eyebrow arched in a way that was pure Riley. "Funny, she hasn't told me much about you, at least not recently." Before I could respond, Riley burst through the door, slightly out of breath. "Bree, I thought I told you to wait for me in the lobby." Brianna shrugged, unapologetic. I got curious. Wanted to see the famous Quinn for myself. The tension in the room was palpable. Riley's eyes darted between her daughter and me, a mix of anxiety and something else. Protectiveness, maybe? Clouding her features. "Well," I said, trying to break the awkwardness. "Now that we're all here, why don't we grab some coffee? I was just about to close up for lunch anyway." Riley shot me a grateful look, but Brianna shook her head. "Thanks, but I've got plans with some old high school friends. I just wanted to stop by and say hi." She turned to her mother. "Dinner later?" Riley nodded, giving her daughter a quick hug. As Brianna left, the bell's chimes seemed to echo in the sudden silence. "I'm sorry about that," Riley said finally, sinking into my consultation chair. "I should have given you a heads up." I sat across from her, our knees almost touching. "Hey, no worries, she seems protective." Riley laughed, but it was a tired sound. "That's one word for it. I think she's still adjusting to the idea of me dating again. Especially a woman?" I finished softly. She nodded, reaching out to take my hand. "It's new territory for both of us. I never really explored this part of myself after college. After you." The weight of our shared history hung between us, years of what-ifs and missed chances. I squeezed her hand gently. "We've got time to figure it out. No rush." Just then, a crack of thunder shook the building, making us both jump. Outside, the sky had turned an ominous gray, rain already beginning to pelt the windows. "Damn," Riley muttered, checking her phone. "They're saying it's going to be like this all night. I should probably head back upstairs before it gets worse." I glanced at the steadily worsening downpour. "Or, you could stay. I've got a killer sound system and a decent bottle of wine in the back. We could wait out the storm together." For a moment, I thought she might refuse. But then a smile slowly spread across her face, reminiscent of the carefree girl I'd known in college. "You know what? That sounds perfect." As the storm raged outside, Riley and I found ourselves huddled on the small couch in my back office, the lights dimmed and soft jazz playing in the background. We talked for hours, filling in the gaps of the years we'd spent apart. I told her about my struggles to establish myself as a tattoo artist, the failed relationships that had left me wary of commitment. She opened up about her marriage, her fears of disappointing her daughter, the growing realization that she'd spent too long living someone else's idea of success. "I used to dream about opening my own little bakery," she confessed, her head resting on my shoulder. "Something cozy, you know, where people could come and feel at home." I ran my fingers through her hair, marveling at how natural it felt. "It's not too late, you know, especially with all this restructuring going on at work. Maybe it's a sign." Riley lifted her head, her blue eyes meeting mine in the dim light. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's time for both of us to take a chance." I'm not sure who moved first, but suddenly we were kissing. It was different from the tentative kiss we'd shared in the studio. This was hungry, urgent, years of pent-up longing finally finding release. Riley's hands tangled in my hair as I pulled her closer, the storm outside fading away until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. When we finally came up for air, Both of us were breathless. Riley's lips were swollen, her hair delightfully mussed, and I couldn't remember ever seeing anything more beautiful. "Wow," she whispered, a slow smile spreading across her face. "That was—" "Yeah," I agreed, unable to stop grinning. "It really was." What happened next was a blur of sensation and emotion. Clothes were shed, inhibitions cast aside as we rediscovered each other's bodies. It was both familiar and thrillingly new, each touch electric, each kiss a revelation. Afterwards, as we lay tangled together on the narrow couch, the storm still raging outside, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. Riley's head was tucked under my chin, her breath warm against my neck. "Quinn," she murmured, her voice heavy with sleep. "I think I'm ready. For that change we talked about." I pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Yeah?" She nodded, snuggling closer. "Yeah. Life's too short to play it safe, right?" As the rain continued to fall, I allowed myself to imagine a future with Riley by my side. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to take the leap. Little did I know, the coming days would test our newfound connection in ways neither of us could have anticipated. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest brewing in Bayshore Tower, threatening to sweep away everything we'd just begun to build. But in that moment, holding Riley close, I was ready to weather any storm that came our way. The morning after the storm, I woke up alone on the couch in my back office, a blanket tucked around me and the lingering scent of Riley's perfume in the air. For a moment, I wondered if I had dreamed the whole thing. But then I spotted a note on my desk, written in Riley's elegant scrawl. "Had to run home to change before work. Last night was amazing. Coffee later. R." I couldn't help the grin that spread across my face. It had been real, all of it. But as the day wore on, that giddy feeling began to fade. Whispers and worried glances filled the lobby of Bayshore Tower. The merger that had been looming for weeks was finally happening, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. I was in the middle of a tattoo when my phone buzzed with a text from Riley. "Emergency meeting called. Looks bad, talk later." My stomach churned with worry. I tried to focus on my work, but my mind kept drifting upstairs, imagining Riley in some sterile conference room, her future hanging in the balance. It was late afternoon when she finally appeared in my doorway, looking pale and shaken. "Hey," I said softly, crossing the room to her. "What happened?" Riley let out a shaky breath. It's not good, Quinn. They're cutting entire departments, mine included." I pulled her into a hug, feeling her tremble against me. "Gosh, Riley, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" She pulled back, wiping at her eyes. "I don't know. I've got a meeting with HR tomorrow to discuss options." The way she said it made it clear there weren't many. Just then, a group of executives walked by the studio, their voices carrying through the open door. "Have to be strategic about this. Can't have personal relationships clouding judgment. Heard Thompson's been spending a lot of time with that new marketing exec." Riley and I froze, our eyes meeting in silent panic. As the voices faded, she stepped away from me, running a hand through her hair. "Quinn, I think we need to be careful," she said, her voice low. "If they think or whatever this IIS is affecting business decisions." I nodded, trying to ignore the way my heart clenched. "Yeah, of course, we'll keep things professional. At least until this all blows over." Riley gave me a grateful smile, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. As she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were standing on the edge of a precipice, one wrong move away from losing everything. The next few days were a blur of hushed conversations and furtive glances. Riley and I tried to keep our distance, but it was like fighting gravity. Every time I saw her in the lobby or the elevator, it took all my willpower not to reach out and touch her. The rumors, meanwhile, continued to swirl. I overheard snippets of conversation in the coffee shop, in the elevator, even from clients in my chair. Heard they're letting go of anyone who's not essential. Wonder how some people are keeping their jobs. Must have friends in high places. It all came to a head on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I was just finishing up a consultation when Riley burst into the studio, her eyes wild. "Quinn, we have a problem," she said, her voice tight with panic. The board. They're questioning my position, saying I haven't shown enough value to the company. I felt my blood run cold. What? But you've only been here a few months. How could they possibly? It's not just that, she cut me off, pacing the room. There are rumors about us, about how I might be using our relationship to secure my position. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That's ridiculous. We've barely even. I know, Riley said, running a hand through her hair. But perception is everything in this world. And right now, the perception is that I'm a liability. I watched her, feeling helpless. This brilliant, talented woman, who had taken a chance on a new career, on us, was about to lose everything. And for what? Office politics and baseless rumors? Something inside me snapped. No, I said, my voice firm. I'm not letting this happen. Riley looked at me, confusion and hope warring in her eyes. What do you mean? I grabbed my jacket, determination surging through me. I'm going to talk to the board. Set the record straight. Quinn, no, Riley protested, grabbing my arm. You can't. Your lease is worth risking if it means saving your job, I finished. Riley, you deserve to be here, and I'm not going to let a bunch of stuffy executives who don't even know you make decisions based on gossip and speculation. For a moment we stood there, the air charged with tension and unspoken feelings. Then, slowly, Riley nodded. Okay, she whispered. But whatever happens, thank you. I pulled her into a fierce hug, not caring who might see. Always, I murmured into her hair. As I made my way to the elevator, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, I knew I was about to risk everything. My business, my reputation, maybe even my future with Riley. But looking back at her standing in my studio, her eyes shining with a mixture of hope and worry, I knew it was worth it. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. The thought both terrified and exhilarated me. As the elevator doors closed, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the battle ahead. Little did I know, the real fight was just beginning. The aftermath of my impromptu board meeting was like the calm before a storm. For a few days, an uneasy quiet settled over Bayshore Tower. Riley and I tiptoed around each other, exchanging meaningful glances but careful not to fuel any more gossip. Then, on a crisp Friday morning, the other shoe dropped. I was setting up for my first appointment when Riley burst into the studio, her face pale and her hands shaking. It's over, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They're letting me go. My heart sank. Riley, I'm so sorry, I thought. She shook her head, cutting me off. It's not your fault, Quinn. If anything, your speech to the board bought me a few more days, but in the end. She trailed off, her eyes welling with tears. I pulled her into a tight hug, not caring who might see through the studio windows. As she cried softly into my shoulder, I felt a mixture of helplessness and rage. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. When she finally pulled away, wiping at her eyes, I saw a glimmer of something in her gaze. Not defeat, but determination? You know what? She said, a hint of her old fire returning. Maybe this is a blessing in disguise. I've been playing it safe for too long, Quinn. Maybe it's time I took that leap we talked about. I couldn't help but smile. Yeah? What did you have in mind? Riley's eyes sparkled. Remember that bakery dream I told you about? Well, I've been doing some research. There's this old storefront in Ybor City that's up for lease. It needs work, but it could be perfect, I finished, feeling a surge of excitement. Riley, that's amazing. She nodded, her smile growing. I know it's crazy starting over at my age, but life's too short for regrets, right? I pulled her close again, planting a kiss on her forehead. Absolutely. And hey, if you need help with the renovations, I know a pretty good artist who might be willing to lend a hand. Riley laughed, the sound lightening the heavy atmosphere. Oh yeah? Does this artist work for baked goods? Depends on the goods, I teased, winking at her. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from a client. Reality came crashing back in. Shoot, I've got an appointment in 10 minutes, but hey, why don't we celebrate tonight? I'll close up early, we can grab dinner. Riley's smile faltered slightly. Actually, I promised Brianna I'd have dinner with her tonight. To break the news about the job. Oh, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. Of course, yeah. Family first. Riley squeezed my hand. Rain check? I nodded, forcing a smile. Absolutely. Go, be with your daughter. We'll catch up soon. As I watched her leave, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, but I pushed it aside, focusing on the day ahead. It wasn't until later that evening, as I was closing up shop, that I realized what had been nagging at me. Riley had seemed hesitant, like there was something she wasn't telling me. I was just about to call her when the studio door burst open. To my shock, it was Brianna, Riley's daughter, looking furious. "What the hell did you do?" she demanded, storming up to me. I held up my hands, bewildered. "Whoa, Brianna, what are you talking about?" "My mom," she shouted. "She just told me she's quitting her job to open some stupid bakery, and it's all because of you." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Brianna, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your mom lost her job due to company restructuring. The bakery is her idea." "Save it," Brianna snapped. "I know all about your little relationship. How convenient that you swooped in just as her job was in jeopardy." I felt my temper rising. "Now hold on a minute." But Brianna wasn't finished. "You know what? I did some digging. Found out about you and Mom in college, how you broke her heart." That stopped me cold. "What?" Brianna's eyes narrowed. "Oh, she didn't tell you? How she was ready to give up everything for you but you chickened out? How she cried for weeks after you ended things?" I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Riley and I had never really talked about how things ended back then. I'd always assumed. "Brianna," I said, my voice hoarse, "I think there's been a misunderstanding. Your mom and I." "Save it," she cut me off. "Just stay away from her, okay? She doesn't need you messing up her life again." With that, she stormed out, leaving me reeling. I sank into my chair, my mind spinning. Had I really hurt Riley that badly all those years ago? And why hadn't she told me? I was still sitting there, lost in thought, when my phone buzzed. It was a text from Riley. "Can we talk? Meet me at the old Ybor City storefront. It's important." My heart racing, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Whatever was going on, whatever misunderstandings there were, I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't going to let Riley slip away again, not without a fight. As I drove through the darkening streets of Tampa, my mind whirled with possibilities. What did Riley want to talk about? Was she having second thoughts about us, about the bakery? I pulled up in front of the old storefront, its windows dark and dusty. But as I got out of the car, I saw a flicker of light inside. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the creaky door. The interior was dimly lit by a few candles, casting long shadows across the empty space. And there, in the center of the room, stood Riley. "Hey," I said softly, my voice echoing in the empty space. Riley turned, her eyes shining in the candlelight. "Quinn, you came." I took a step closer. "Of course I came. Riley, what's going on?" "Brianna came to see me and she said some things." Riley sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I know. I'm so sorry about that. I told her about us, about the bakery. She didn't take it well." "Yeah, I got that impression," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Riley, why didn't you tell me about how things ended between us in college?" She looked away, her shoulders slumping. "I didn't want to dredge up old pain. Quinn, that was a lifetime ago. We were different people then." I stepped closer, gently turning her face towards me. "Were we? Because I gotta tell you, Riley, the way I feel about you now, it's not so different from how I felt back then." Her eyes widened, a mix of hope and fear swirling in their depths. "Quinn." "No, let me finish," I said, taking her hands in mine. "I was scared back then. Scared of how much I felt for you, scared of what it meant for my future. So I ran. And it was the biggest mistake of my life." Riley's breath hitched. "Quinn, But I wasn't done. I'm not that scared kid anymore, Riley. I know what I want, and what I want is you. You, and this crazy bakery dream, and whatever else life throws our way." For a moment, the only sound was our breathing and the faint hum of traffic outside. Then, slowly, a smile spread across Riley's face. "Well," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I guess it's a good thing I brought these then." From behind her back, she produced a small box. Inside were two perfectly crafted cupcakes, each topped with a swirl of lavender frosting. I couldn't help but laugh. Lavender, you remembered. Riley's smile widened. How could I forget? As we stood there in the empty storefront, sharing cupcakes and kisses that tasted of sugar and new beginnings, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, disapproving daughters, skeptical landlords, the daunting task of starting a new business, we'd face them together. The phoenix on Riley's shoulder, barely visible beneath her blouse, seemed to shimmer in the candlelight, a symbol of rebirth, of second chances. Our second chance. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Riley and I threw ourselves into planning the bakery, spending every spare moment poring over business plans and recipes. The old storefront in Ybor City slowly began to transform, shedding its dusty neglect for a fresh coat of paint and the promise of new beginnings. But even as our dream took shape, reality kept intruding. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, I was sketching design ideas for the bakery's logo when Riley burst into my studio, her face pale. "Quinn," she said, her voice shaking. "I just got the official notice. My last day at Suncoast is Friday." I set down my pencil, crossing the room to pull her into a hug. "Hey, it's okay. We knew this was coming, right?" Riley nodded against my shoulder, but I could feel the tension in her body. "I know, it's real now. Quinn? What if we're making a huge mistake?" I pulled back, meeting her eyes. "Do you remember what you told me the night of the storm? Life's too short to play it safe." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Using my own words against me, huh?" "Well, they were pretty good words," I teased, earning a soft laugh. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it, feeling my stomach drop. "Shit," I muttered. Riley frowned. "What is it?" I hesitated, not wanting to add to her stress, but we'd promised honesty no matter what. "It's from the building management. They're planning a full renovation of the tower. All tenants need to vacate by the end of the month." Riley's eyes widened. "What? But that's less than 2 weeks away. Quinn, what are we going to do?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "We'll figure it out. Maybe we can speed up the work on the bakery, move my equipment there temporarily." But even as I said it, I knew it was a long shot. The bakery was nowhere near ready, and moving a tattoo studio wasn't exactly a simple process. Riley must have seen the doubt in my eyes. She squared her shoulders, a determined look crossing her face. "No, you know what? This is a sign. We've been trying to juggle too much, keep one foot in our old lives. Maybe it's time we go all in." I raised an eyebrow. "What are you thinking?" A slow smile spread across her face. "I'm thinking, what if we combined our dreams, a tattoo studio and bakery all in one space?" For a moment, I just stared at her. Then slowly I began to grin. "Riley Gonzalez, you're a genius." She laughed, the sound chasing away the last of the tension. "Well, I don't know about that, but I do know that together we can make this work." We spent the rest of the afternoon brainstorming, the energy between us electric with possibility. By the time we locked up the studio that night, we had a rough plan sketched out, my tattoo area in the back, Riley's bakery counter up front, with a cozy seating area bridging the two. As we stood on the sidewalk, the Tampa night warm and humid around us, Riley turned to me with a mischievous glint in her eye. "You know, we should probably celebrate this new partnership properly." I felt a thrill run through me. "Oh yeah? What did you have in mind?" Instead of answering, she pulled me close, her lips meeting mine in a kiss that left me breathless. When we finally parted, both of us were grinning like teenagers. "My place or yours?" I asked, my voice husky. Riley pretended to consider. "Well, your place is closer." We barely made it through my front door before clothes started flying. There was an urgency to our lovemaking that night, a need to reaffirm our connection in the face of all the uncertainty swirling around us. Afterwards, as we lay tangled in my sheets, Riley's head on my chest, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, we'd face them together. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing us just yet. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing insistently. Groggily, I reached for it, careful not to disturb Riley. "Hello?" I mumbled. Quinn? It's Brianna. I sat up, instantly alert. Brianna, is everything okay? There was a pause, then, I need to talk to my mom. Is she with you? I glanced at Riley, still peacefully asleep beside me. Yeah, she's here. Brianna, what's going on? Another pause. When she spoke again, her voice was tight with emotion. It's about Dad. He's threatening to tell the board about Mom's relationship back in college. With you. I felt my blood run cold. What? But why would he? He found out about the bakery plan. Brianna cut in. He's worried it'll affect his alimony payments. Says if Mom goes through with it, he'll make sure everyone knows how she threw away her future for some tattoo artist. I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of anger. Brianna, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. No, she interrupted, her voice surprisingly firm. No, it's not. Look, I may have misjudged you, and Mom. I've never seen her as happy as she's been these past few weeks, so I guess what I'm saying is, how can I help? I felt a lump form in my throat. Brianna, thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, well, she said, a hint of her usual sass returning. Don't get all mushy on me, just take care of her, okay? I will, I promised. We'll figure this out. As I hung up, I looked down at Riley, still blissfully unaware of the storm brewing on the horizon. I knew I should wake her, tell her what was happening. But for just a moment, I allowed myself to simply watch her sleep, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought us back together. Whatever her ex-husband was planning, whatever obstacles still lay in our path, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't going to let anyone or anything come between us again. Not now, not ever. With a deep breath, I gently shook Riley's shoulder. Hey, sleepyhead, I said softly, we need to talk. As her eyes fluttered open, confusion quickly replaced by concern as she saw my expression, I steeled myself for the conversation ahead. We'd weathered storms before. We'd weather this one too. Together. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of our new space in Ybor City, casting long shadows across the bare floors. Riley and I stood side by side, surveying the empty storefront that would soon become our shared dream. Can you believe we're really doing this? Riley asked, her voice a mix of excitement and nerves. I squeezed her hand, feeling the cool metal of her newly acquired ring. Believe it, babe. Inked and Risen is about to take Tampa by storm. The past few months had been a whirlwind. After the dust settled from her ex-husband's threats, which, thanks to Brianna's unexpected support and some clever maneuvering on our part, had amounted to nothing more than hot air, we'd thrown ourselves into making our shared vision a reality. The corporate tower that had once defined our lives was now just a distant memory. In its place stood this beautiful, if slightly dilapidated piece of Tampa history. High ceilings, exposed brick walls, and large windows that would soon showcase my artwork alongside Riley's pastries. Where should we start? Riley mused, her eyes sparkling with possibility. I grinned, pulling her close. Well, I was thinking we could christen the place properly. She laughed, playfully swatting my arm. Down, girl. We've got work to do. And work we did. Over the next few weeks, the space slowly transformed. My tattoo station took shape in the back, a perfect blend of professional and artistic. Up front, Riley's dream bakery counter emerged, all gleaming surfaces and the promise of sweet delights. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were permits to wrangle, equipment breakdowns to navigate, and more than one heated debate over color schemes. But through it all, Riley and I stood united, our bond growing stronger with each challenge overcome. The night before our grand opening, we found ourselves alone in the nearly finished space. Soft jazz played from the speakers we'd just installed, and the air was thick with the scent of fresh paint and Riley's test batches. Dance with me, I said suddenly, holding out my hand. Riley raised an eyebrow. Here? Now? I nodded, pulling her close. Why not? It's our place after all. As we swayed together in the dim light, I couldn't help but marvel at the journey that had brought us here. From college sweethearts to strangers to this, partners in every sense of the word. Penny for your thoughts, Riley murmured, her head resting on my shoulder. I smiled, pressing a kiss to her temple. Just thinking about how lucky I am, how close we came to missing out on all of this. She pulled back slightly, her blue eyes meeting mine. We found our way back to each other. That's what matters. As our lips met in a tender kiss, I felt a sense of rightness settle over me. This was where we were meant to be. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for a grand opening. As we put the finishing touches on everything, a steady stream of familiar faces began to arrive. Brianna was first, arms laden with flowers and a nervous smile on her face. She'd been a constant presence during the renovation, her initial hostility melting into genuine support. As she hugged her mother, then somewhat awkwardly embraced me, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Family, in all its complicated glory. My regular clients started trickling in, many of them excited to see my new digs and sample Riley's creations. The buzz of conversation and laughter filled the air, mingling with the scent of fresh coffee and pastries. As the morning wore on, I found myself constantly seeking out Riley in the crowd, our eyes meeting across the room in moments of shared joy and disbelief. We'd done it. We'd really done it. Just before the official ribbon cutting, Riley pulled me aside, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Quinn," she said softly, "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I'm pregnant." For a moment, I just stared at her, my mind reeling. Then, with a whoop of joy, I swept her into my arms, spinning her around as she laughed. "Are you happy?" she asked as I set her down, her hands cupping my face. I nodded, feeling tears prick at my own eyes. Ecstatic. "Riley, it's everything." As we rejoined the crowd, our hands intertwined, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced before. This was it. This was home. The rest of the day passed in a blur of congratulations, well wishes, and the satisfying hum of a business off to a strong start. By the time we locked up that night, exhausted but elated, I knew we'd created something special. Standing in the doorway of our new venture, Riley's head on my shoulder and the promise of our future growing within her, I couldn't help but smile. Life had thrown us plenty of curveballs, but we'd caught every one, together. "Ready to go home?" Riley asked, stifling a yawn. I looked around at the space we'd created, at the woman I loved, at the life we were building. "Honey," I said, pressing a kiss to her forehead, "we are home." As we walked hand in hand into the warm Tampa night, the neon sign of Inked and Risen glowing behind us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever challenges lay ahead, parenthood, business ownership, the ever-unpredictable dance of life, we'd face them side by side. After all, we had the perfect recipe, a dash of ink, a sprinkle of sugar, and a whole lot of love. And really, what more could anyone ask for?